Welcome to UKIYO. I'm Kenza Gray, the co-founder and curator at Grey Area Gallery, and let me show you around. UKIYO presents a private collection of Japanese woodblock prints. It's very personal to my heart, as I'm a part owner in the collection. It's a collection that I've put together with my father over many years. It was just a hobby of ours and never intended to be an exhibition. So the pieces that have been collected are not necessarily a uniformed sort of showcase of Japanese prints, but more so a very personal expression of pieces that we saw and that we loved. But this created a slight obstacle when the decision was made that we wanted to put on this exhibition, because there wasn't necessarily one theme that I could explore or an obvious layout. One thing that I knew from the start was that I wanted this triptych to be at the front. I wanted people to walk in and instantly be greeted with it. Firstly, because it's one of my favourites and I think it's super impactful, but secondly, because I wanted to instantly show people some of the different things that the ukiyo-e artists were experimenting with. So I think this is a really cool example of the sort of, I'll say in inverted commas, but special effects that the woodblock printers and carvers and so on were creating in the prints. So in the centre panel here, it's very obvious. You can see this sort of sparkling in the ink of the lion's coat. This sort of effect would have been achieved by grinding up minerals or metals or sort of pearls and adding it to the ink to create this really quite vivid sparkle. Another example is you can see in the lion's mane that they've embossed the texture of the fur. So they haven't actually carved the lines in, but instead moistened the paper and embossed it in to create this texture on the piece. So I just think that this is a really nice example for people to walk in and see something that I don't think you can really see on a screen as easily. If you're looking at images of these prints, it's not the same as if you can sort of move around and let the light catch the sort of sparkling effects or the shadows that are created in the embossing. So once in the exhibition and after you've had a little look at the triptych at the front panel, naturally people are turning to the left here where we have an introduction to ukiyo-e prints and an introduction on how woodblock printing is actually done. So although it is a very personal collection and, as I mentioned, not sort of formulated around an exhibition, there was some prominent artists that stood out that we had multiple pieces of, and I thought it would be nice to sort of explore those artists as you go around the exhibition. So firstly, you're greeted by 5 prints by the artist Curator. He was known as the most prolific ukiyo-e artist during his time, having produced, it's thought, around 20,000 prints during his lifetime. And bearing in mind that these prints were often printed in the thousands, that adds up to a lot of prints. You can see here very typical pieces when he's known for. They're kabuki actors and they're very stylized with very exaggerated hands and feet and expressions on their faces. During this time, he was hugely popular. It's thought that he was even more well-renowned than some of his contemporaries. As you move along in the exhibition, you're greeted with Utagara Hiroshiga, who is one of the most well-known artists nowadays. His typical style of landscape is extremely recognizable. He's often using these very exaggerated gradients and very serene landscapes. One piece that I think is really interesting to dwell on in this exhibition is his collaborative piece that he did with Curator. You can see that his very typical style of landscape is at the top there, and then Curator's very typical exaggerated people portrait is at the bottom there. And this is part of a series that they did together of the 53 stations of Kaido Road by 2 brushes. So they've done this huge collaborative series. And I just think it's a really beautiful example of these 2 very different but contemporary of each other artists coming together to create a piece which encompassed both of their unique styles. Along the back wall, we've featured 3 triptychs which all depict beauties and courtesans. So in the top 2 here, we have again examples of ground up minerals and metals in the inks. So in the piece on the left here, in the Milky Way, in the stars, they sparkle, and that was achieved by ground up mica. And then over here in the procession, in the sort of turquoise, which would have been green, bottom panel here, you can catch glimmers of glittering in the bottom there. I think they're two very sort of expressive and fun pieces, but both very different. In this piece, a lot of people have noticed the sort of serene nature, that you can almost hear the girl at the bottom here playing this musical instrument, and that you can almost feel the wind blowing into them. Then you have this very dynamic layout with all of their faces looking in different directions, drawing your eye around the whole work. Then over here we have a very linear procession, but it's a very fun, like expressive movement that they have here. And again, you can almost feel the energy of being in that scene. Again, this is contrasted by the triptych down here, where each panel has a focus on one woman and the supporting people around her. But I think the focus in this piece is their very beautiful dresses and the patterns and the detail that the artist has put into capturing the patterns. So central of the room, we have this cabinet which features some of the prints of Miyagawa Shatai and his series, which was Flowers of the Floating World. But they were never exposed, they were never framed, and they were kept in this portfolio, which we've put at the top here. So they are really well preserved colourings. You see a lot of the very vivid purples and greens that may have been present in a lot of the other works, but that have faded away due to the pigments that are less stable. He focused on the beauties of the women of the upper class. So they're very serene and beautiful pieces that capture everyday life of the upper class, which is very different to a lot of the pieces featured on the walls around us. We wanted to look at beauties in these woodblock prints and sort of explore the idea that their lives were not necessarily as idealized as the images that we see. I thought it was important to just give people a little idea of that although these are beautiful, serene and very ideal images, that the lives of a lot of these women were not necessarily as ideal. So we have a little panel explaining that and talking about the licensed brothels in the entertainment districts. That's not to say that these pieces are showing women who are struggling in their life. It's just to let people know that these are idealized images created by men, most likely for the enjoyment of men. Behind me now are the 3 hokusais that we have in this exhibition. He is, I think most people would agree with me, the most known in our contemporary society. It's almost impossible to think of Japanese woodblock prints and not have his great wave pop into your mind. It's a very iconic image, and it sort of made hokusai an almost household name. Here we have 3 pieces from his celebrated series, The 100 Views of Mount Fuji. They're very different in a way to a lot of the other pieces that we have up. They're just in black and white, they are a little bit smaller, and I think that it really has encouraged people to get up close and look at the extremely fine lines and the detail that the carvers were able to achieve in this process. You can see the extremely fine detail that they've achieved in the foliage of the trees all along here, but then that is contrasted in, I think, a really subtle but beautiful way with the big sort of empty sky and Mount Fuji just appearing out of the back there. It's a very nice end in a way to the room, in that it's allowed people to see these big, sort of impressive, colourful pieces all around the room, but then almost end it in a way with this household name of hokusai and really get up close and think about the detail. We're about to close the doors on UKIYO. The pieces that have sold are off to their new homes, but there's many still available to purchase and they will be published on our website soon. Thank you to everyone who came and supported us, and I hope that if you didn't make it to the exhibition, this has given you a little taste of it.